I think this is a fundamental change.
Promulgation of the Constitution.
Hello and welcome to the 12th episode in our series, The Evolution of a Nation, a documentary series chronicling Uganda's key political and economic events since 1944. I'm Bat Kakoza. In the previous episode, we saw the futile invasion of Ugandan dissidents from Tanzania and Amin's increased brutality. In this episode, we take a look at Amin's struggle to garner support from African leaders, the appalling economic conditions, and the several events that led to the crumbling of Amin's regime, including the wanton murder of Archbishop Lumu. Thanks for joining us. Towards the end of 1972 and during the bigger part of 1973, Idi Amin invited and hosted a number of friendly African heads of states in a bid to drum support for his policies and government. President Nimeri of Sudan stopped over at Entebbe on his way to Dar es Salaam, and the two held a private meeting in the VIP lounge at Entebbe Airport.
Bokassa of the Central African Republic.
Jean Beder Bokassa of the Central African Republic paid a 3-day state visit, during which he received Uganda's then highest honor, the Order of the Source of the Nile. In return, Amin was presented with the National Order of the Central African Republic.
Thousands of Ugandan and Zaire people.
During the Seko Mobutu of Zaire's state visit to Uganda, Amin complimented his guest by renaming Lake Albert Lake Mobutu Sese Seko. Late in 1972, Somalia's Siad Barre was one of the guests invited to attend Uganda's 10th independence anniversary. During the celebrations, Amin invested him with the Order of the Source of the Nile.
Was accorded to King Faisal of Saudi Arabia.
Saudi Arabia's King Faisal had a 4-day state visit, during which the Saudi government promised to support many projects, in addition to the already announced £6 million sterling loan.
From the west coast of Africa, President Bongo
In July 1972, Bongo of Gabon made a 2-day state visit.
in Mubende province. The hospital
He officiated at the opening of Chiboga Hospital in Mubende. In 1974, Amin traveled to Addis Ababa to attend the 10th meeting of the Organization of African Unity.
Addis Ababa, where the 10th meeting of the
Amin and his entourage were welcomed by Emperor Haile Selassie before proceeding to the headquarters of the OAU, where Amin addressed the meeting of the heads of states. After concluding his address, Amin surprised the members when he left the podium and proceeded to extend a handshake with Tanzania's Julius Nyerere and said something to him.
Nyerere happened to be one of the heads of state sitting down there. From there, when he was going to his seat, Amin went directly to Nyerere and shook hands with him like this. Now, in giving Nyerere his hand, Nyerere sort of compulsively also gave him his arm. There was no record of Nyerere having uttered a word in reply to whatever Amin was saying to him. But he impulsively raised his hand in response to Amin's extension.
Amin took his turn as host of the OAU summit in 1975 and chairman of the Assembly of the Heads of State and Government for 1975-76 in Kampala.
30 African countries.
After Mogadishu, Amin was very happy that this thing had happened. in spite of Nyerere and other people who were opposed to OAU coming here.
Notable developments at the time included the construction of the International Conference Center and the Nile Mansions, later the Nile Hotel, and currently the Serena International Hotel, to host the conference.
In 71, OAU was to have taken place here, and that's when that conference center was built, between 70 and 71. It was to have followed that summit that took place in Lusaka. In 71 is when the coup took place here. Before even they could finish all what was required to be done. So come 74 in Mogadishu, when a decision to take it to host it here took place, that conference center had been improved over and above what it was in January 1971. To organize a conference of 50 heads of state and government within a year is something which was not easy. Not when you had the whole of Europe against you, against Amin's government, when you had Africa divided over Amin's being there, learning from what happened in Mulungushi, that is in Lusaka. All one needed was suites for heads of state, and then everybody else lived in these small hotels around that way.
He immediately sought to use his position to rid Africa of what he called all kinds of imperialism from both capitalists and communist countries.
Amin carried a good rapport with the fighting the whites, and when you were in that, that story was going around, to go to America and others to say, please help us to deal with America. Stop drinking his coffee. You have a problem.
In 1975, Idi Amin declared himself president for life and embarked on a campaign to humiliate British nationals. In what he referred to as the white man's burden in Africa, on the 18th July during a party for diplomats, wearing a Scottish cap, Amin arrived at the function being carried by 4 British businessmen on a makeshift throne, while a Swedish businessman held an umbrella in the manner of the servants who once shielded tribal rulers from the sun. It was his way of showing what he called the African superiority and power over white people. And on October 2nd, 1975, a group of white people were made to kneel down and swear allegiance while reciting his titles: His Excellency, Life President, Field Marshal Alhaji Idi Amin Dada, VC, DSO, MC. He then declared himself the conqueror of the British Empire.
I am speaking as a great man who is the conqueror of the British Empire.
He then embarked on building his army as one of the best in Africa at the time, with fighter planes, MiGs from Russia, tanks among others. He was so infatuated with his abilities that he threatened to fight the imperialists in South Africa and the Israelis from Palestine.
The total liberation of Africa must be put into practice. He says, I'm going to hit Cape Town to fight apartheid.
The military build-up raised concern in Kenya, and there was tension between the two countries. The tension reached its climax in February 1976 when Idi Amin announced that he would investigate the possibility that parts of southern Sudan and western and central Kenya, up to within 32 kilometers of Nairobi, were historically a part of colonial Uganda.
Early in 77, the Commissioner for Prisons invited President Amin and members of cabinet to the opening of a new prison farm in East Acholi near Kitugum, a place called Lotuturu. Now, on that occasion, I remember Amin addressing the people whom he knew as he did, that they are neighboring to Sudan. And he was telling everybody there, said, well, look, we want you people to be good neighbors to our brothers and sisters from Sudan. You are asked where in the battlefront here, so I want you to be good people and rest of it. After all, this is where the joke now started. After all of us in Africa were once at one time one country. But the imperialists, that's what he said, came and divided us up. And in fact, to tell you the truth, even these people from the cabinet were not actually telling me the truth. But I've just discovered that in case, say, for example, of Uganda, Uganda used to extend right up to the Rift Valley. And one of these days, I'm going to have a word with the Muse about that. That's where it stopped. I remember this, that's where he stopped in that particular case. And I think the head of the press unit at that time, Idrissa Mayanja, was told by Amin, said, well, look, you forget what I said there. You put this in the press, that I have announced to Ugandans that one of these days I'm going to ask Muse to say if we can redraw the boundary to go back to what it used to be. That is what was put up in the press, not what Amin announced to the crowds in Lututuru. Now, when this thing came out, it exploded in Kenya.
The Kenyan government responded with a stern statement that Kenya would not part with a single inch of its territory. At that time, President Jomo Kenyatta was suspicious of his vice Arap Moi, whom he accused of not only nurturing subversive ambitions, but having covert dealings with Idi Amin.
The old man Kenyatta told Moi, said, well, look, you see what your friend in Uganda is saying, exactly what you people have been up to. So I want you to go to Malaba and tell that man that if we stepped 1 foot in Kenya like this, I'm now telling all Kenyans to get their rungus, to get to get their spears and the rest of it. We'll kill that snake before he steps 1 foot into Kenya. Moi came and organized a rally on the Kenyan side of Malaba and said, Wananchi, get ready, say yes. Everybody get your rungu, say yes. Get your knife, say it. Now, at that point, okay, this is history. At that point, these trucks which used to bring milk to Uganda from KCC in Kenya was passing. Now, from today, you see that truck, we had people who are feeding. We Kenyans are the ones who are feeding this snake across there. From today onwards, that is the last truck to get into Uganda carrying milk. We don't want any more milk going to Uganda. That actually revealed a historical fact which had not been known to many people. That one, Uganda actually feeds Kenya rather than the other way around. Two, that Kenya never had surplus milk enough for Kenya and supply to Uganda. What Kenya had was powdered milk imported from Denmark to Kenya, reconditioned and sold here as KCC products. When this happened, is actually when Justin Byagaire was the Minister of Agriculture. And I remember in a subsequent cabinet meeting here, Amin said, well, look, who cares about the milk? Now, Byagaire, he turned it, he said, yes, sir, you go and look for milk for our babies in case it becomes necessary, in case we're short here. But I think we have enough milk here. Byagaire took a plane from here, went to Denmark, exactly where Kenya KCC was getting their milk. And since then, incidentally, up to now, Kenya has never recovered from that possibility of supplying Uganda with enough milk, with excess milk.
Idi Amin backed down after the Kenyan army deployed troops and armored personnel carriers along the Kenya-Uganda border. In accordance with the Ugandan laws then, Amin's status as president of Uganda automatically entitled him to assume the post of Chancellor of Makerere University. Within 2 years, Amin had sought and won the title Doctor of Laws, PhD, from Makerere University.
It didn't come from Senate direct. Member of staff proposed it. And when he proposed it, it was very embarrassing for all of us because you don't want to give him a doctorate. So, but they made sure that all members of the university voted, wherever you were. I think I was Arusha when they brought me papers. It has been proposed that His Excellency. So people were more or less taken at ransom to vote for Amin, because nobody would dare at that time put in writing no. So Amin was given the degree of doctor.
Of what? Doctor of laws?
Yes.
He sought to use this title to wear the intellectual authority necessary to advise the rest of Africa on policy vis-à-vis the unliberated regions of the continent. In spite of his limited education, Amin understood the potential dangers educational institutions, especially Makerere University, would pose to his government. He sought to win the support of the students through courting the guild.
When I was president of the student guild, he worked overtime and employed his charm, and Idi Amin could be charming. He had several personalities wrapped into one. He could turn on his charm, and you would know this is the person who the next moment will order that you should be shot. So he used to invite me to State House. Whenever there were visitors in the country, invite us to the banquet. You know, he worked very hard to try to co-opt me and to co-opt my guild cabinet. And when he discovered that all his efforts were not paying any, not giving any results, were not bearing fruit, then the other side of Idi Amin came out. Well, I can't co-opt them. I can't enroll them in my project, therefore I must get rid of them. Idi Amin decided to ban the guild, to remove me as guild president, and to place me under house arrest in my hall of residence, University Hall, by one De Geer. I was very lucky because somebody very well, highly placed in government was actually in a meeting in which my fate was discussed and my fate was sealed. And the person was good enough to send a messenger to look for me in University Hall and said, look, a meeting has just been held, chaired by Idi Amin, and it's been decided that you must be got rid of. I can't do anything to help you, but I thought you should know. If you can do anything, do it, but this is what's going to happen, and tonight they are coming for you.
Now, by 1974, fear for everyone's life was everywhere, including in the armed forces barracks. Idi Amin had reinforced the State Research Bureau by transferring many Nubians, originally from Anyanya rebels in southern Sudan, from Army and Air Force units to the Bureau, which became notorious for terror.
Because those ones would not question his power at all. So within the army, the senior officers were questioning what was going on. Here and there. I said, this might not be royal. Then he recruited those Anyanyas who would strictly follow whatever, or would do whatever he wanted. Of course, if you are reported to State Research, they find out, they would deal with you, kill you. Then also they went overboard. They started settling scores. If you had a problem, you picked anybody from State Research, he would deal with your enemy the way you want. There are people against the government, politicians whom they thought were not in Amin's good books. So State Research did a lot of damage.
Now, although some promotions were made in May 1973 to keep army officers contented, it did not stop some others from thinking of ways of changing leadership in the country. And the first major coup attempted by some of the senior officers took place in March 1974. The 1974 coup was organized and led by Brigadier Charles Arube, who with a few others had just returned from attending a course in Moscow.
There was an officer running military police called Marera. He was an Anyanya. he was from Sudan. He's the one who made much in the notorious. He's the one who made much in the slaughterhouse. Not only that he was killing politicians, he started killing now soldiers whom he thought were not towing the line. Now, when Arube came with his friends from West Nile, they thought Barira was going too far. So, of course, to Amin, he was doing a good job. Said no. So, that's how the Arubis hatched a coup which did not succeed. Amin became aware before. Some soldiers were killed, including Arube. But immediately after his death, then he thought there should be reconciliation. They went to West Nile, had a meeting, almost all officers from West Nile. They had a meeting. They said, if we have to have peace, Marera must leave Uganda. So it was agreed. They told him to pack whatever he thought was his. He went with 12 lorries full of property. Because even people who were being killed, they were seizing their properties. He was escorted up to the border. And those who were loyal to him were also rounded up and sent back to Sudan.
After the failed attempted coup, Amin was never the same again. He took measures to strengthen his position in the army and reorganized it to bring it directly under his control. On June the 27th, 1976, when members of Popular Front for Liberation of Palestine hijacked an Air France airliner flying from Israel to France, Amin offered the hijackers a safe haven at a protected base at Entebbe Old Airport. They pressed their demand in exchange for the release of Israel hostages. On the night of 4th July 1976, in an Israeli rescue operation codenamed Operation Thunderbolt, Israeli commandos were flown in all the way from Israel and seized control of Entebbe Airport, freeing nearly all the hostages. 3 hostages died during the operation and 10 were wounded. 7 hijackers, about 45 Ugandan soldiers, and 1 Israeli soldier, Yoni Netanyahu, were killed. Amin was humiliated. The 4th hostage, 75-year-old Dora Block, who had been taken to Mulago Hospital in Kampala before the rescue operation, was subsequently murdered in reprisal. By 1976, Uganda was experiencing very poor economic conditions. The country's export crops, coffee in particular, were sold by government parastatals, but most of the foreign currency they earned went for purchasing imports for the army.
And government could therefore not get enough revenue to spend on goods and services. So what happened was their resort to the Bank of Uganda, their resort to what popularly called printing of money. That is through the technical term ways and means, in order to finance the rising huge budget deficit. Now, once you put new money in the economy, which is not supported by production of goods and services, that causes inflation.
The rural African producers, particularly of coffee, turned to smuggling.
Goods were now becoming fewer and fewer and eventually vanished from the market. So that automatically and immediately induced smuggling.
The smuggling problem became an obsession with Amin. He appointed his mercenary advisor, the former British citizen Bob Assos, to take all necessary steps to eliminate the problem. These steps included orders to shoot smugglers on sight.
Bob Assos was somebody who served in the British Armed Forces during colonial days. Now, a story has it that Bob Assos was actually one of those to be was being expelled from the country, and by accident Amin happened to be at the airport, and because Amin had known Bob Assos during Obote's time, they saved him from leaving the country and called him back. Amin had a lot of respect for whites because, as you can see, he was in the army, he was in the colonial army, whoever was white, had any semblance of authority, was a respectable commander to Amin or something. Now here was at Bob Assel's, whom he knew during Obote's regime, and maybe even beyond that, and that he appeared to have contacts with those on authority in Kenya. I mean, definitely had to involve him in this work, particularly where he gave orders but was not seen doing that. Now, with smuggling, those who were also working against Amin took advantage that if smuggling is the fashion, let's also smuggle in what? The fighting equipment to fight Amin, which is why those who were caught smuggling occasionally were summarily executed.
The Arabs who supported Amin financially and propped up his regime believed it was part of their cause to spread Islam in the country, which was so centrally placed on the African continent. Leaders such as King Khalid of Saudi Arabia and Muammar Gaddafi of Libya believed Uganda to be a predominantly Muslim country. Christianity was condemned as an agent of imperialism. The wanton murder of Anglican Archbishop Lumu in company of the two cabinet ministers, Erunayo Riema and Charles Oboth Fumbi, on the 17th February 1977, sent a wave of horror throughout and beyond the Christian world. His death was preceded by an attempt to stage a coup by Acholis and Langes based in Nairobi. Archbishop Lumu was never involved but was informed of it by some Acholis in Uganda. When the Archbishop was asked to join the group, he declined, saying that as a churchman, his concern was with preaching and not fighting. Other people knew about it, warned Amin. He then personally accused Lumu of failing to inform him about the dangers from outside the country, which meant that the Archbishop too wanted to see him overthrown.
It was alleged that Lumu had arms in his church houses. They alleged, they even went there, state research and others. They said they discovered the arms, photographed them, and then allegedly the bishop was shot by Amin himself.
We, the senior officers, were called at Nile Mansion and made to stand in a semicircle. 18 bishops of Anglican Church were brought. They were put in front of us and we were told to condemn them.
Then the stage managed an accident. They called the then OC Traffic, he was called Msasero. They called the OC Traffic to photograph and arrange actually. Then he went, photographed, and they said he had died in an accident. So it was not believable. So police had nothing to investigate. What about if they had you investigating that matter?
The accident was staged just out the State Research Building in Nakasero. It involved these two vehicles. The smaller Toyota Serika saloon car, allegedly being driven by Major Moses Okello Safi, was carrying the three for interrogation. They struggled to overpower the driver, causing him to lose control and rammed into this Range Rover. The three allegedly died instantly, while the driver walked out without any injuries. Now, the details of Lumu's death are some of the most complicated in the Ugandan history. Whether it was a plot to set him up in order to trap Amin into arresting him and draw international condemnation, or whether he was actually involved in the coup plot still remains a mystery. Nevertheless, the Archbishop's murder marked a crucial turning point in Ugandan history. It galvanized the internal and external opposition to Amin's regime, while at the same time triggered a series of increased desperate moves by Amin. In the next episode, we shall focus on Amin's attack on Kajera, the action that drew Nyerere's wrath into waging full-scale war against Amin and the subsequent defeat. We shall also look at the role of Ugandan dissidents in the war and the Moshi Conference. Until then, thanks for watching. I'm Bat Kakoza.
Lele,
Entebbe.